A soundstage at RKO Studios, Lot 7, on the eastern edge of the Gower Gulch backlit. Late afternoon, October 1952. The arc lights are still burning. 4 of them, each rated at 5,000 watts, throwing a flat, merciless white across the polished concrete floor. The crew of 43 men and women stands completely still. Not resting. Not waiting for a cue. Still in the way that people go still when they are watching something that has no name yet. In the center of the room, Katharine Hepburn, 4 Academy Award nominations, 11 years on Broadway, the woman who turned the RKO studio system upside down before she turned 35, stands with her arms folded and her chin lifted exactly 3 degrees above horizontal. Her jaw is set. Her eyes are not angry. They are something colder than angry. They are certain. John Wayne is standing 9 feet away from her. 6 feet 4 inches. 222 pounds in street clothes. He has not moved in 40 seconds. He is looking at her the way a man looks at a horizon line. Not searching, just reading. She has just said something. The 43 people on that sound stage heard every word. And in the silence that followed, not one of them exhaled. The question hanging in that silence is not who is going to win. The question, the one that Katharine Hepburn would spend the next 30 years trying to answer, is what exactly just happened to her. This is that story. To understand what occurred on that sound stage in October of 1952, you have to understand what Hollywood looked like in the fall of that year, and you have to understand what Katharine Hepburn was. Not who she was, what she was. The studio system was fracturing. Television sets were selling at a rate of 200,000 units per month across the United States, and the major lots were hemorrhaging ticket revenue at a pace the executives tried to hide in quarterly reports that nobody believed. RKO Pictures, where this story takes place, was 18 months away from the beginning of the end. Howard Hughes had taken control of the studio in 1948 and run it with the logic of a man who trusted no one and consulted fewer. By 1952, RKO had produced 11 films in a calendar year that previously would have seen 40. The crews were skeletal. The budgets were tighter, and the talent that remained on long-term contracts was either ascending fast or waiting for something to change. Into this environment walked Katharine Hepburn, and she walked in on her own terms, as she always had. She was 45 years old. She had made 31 films. She had won the Academy Award for Best Actress in 1934 for Morning Glory, the first of what would eventually be 4 wins, a record no actor in Hollywood history has matched. She had survived being labeled box office poison by a 1938 exhibitors poll that named her alongside Greta Garbo and Joan Crawford, and she had not merely survived it. She had returned with The Philadelphia Story in 1940, a film she co-produced and controlled from casting through final cut, earning herself back every inch of ground she'd lost, and then some. By 1952, there was not a director on any lot in Hollywood who did not know, before the first day of principal photography, exactly what working with Katharine Hepburn meant. It meant she had read the script more carefully than you had. It meant she had formed opinions about camera angles, about blocking, about line readings, that she would state plainly and without apology. It meant that when she disagreed with you, and she would disagree with you, she did not raise her voice. She lowered it, and she became precise, and that precision was, by all accounts, considerably more difficult to argue with than shouting would have been. It meant that on a set where 40 people were watching, she would tell you clearly and with perfect diction exactly what she thought was wrong with what you were doing and exactly what she thought should happen instead. She was not cruel about it. She was simply correct about it, and she knew she was correct, and she proceeded from that knowledge without detour. The project that brought her to RKO's Lot 7 that October was a Western production, a genre she had never worked in, had openly skeptical opinions about, and had agreed to take on with conditions. Those conditions had been met. She was there. She was prepared, in the particular Hepburn manner of being prepared, which meant she had researched the history of the American frontier with the same rigor she brought to Shakespeare. She had also, in the 3 weeks of production leading up to that afternoon, disagreed with virtually every significant creative choice on set. She disagreed with the lighting, specifically the use of what she called glamour fill on her left cheek, which she argued was period inaccurate and patronizing. She disagreed with the blocking of the central confrontation scene, which she felt was staged for the camera rather than for the emotional truth of the moment. She disagreed with 2 lines of dialogue that she found false, and she had rewritten them herself by hand and submitted the revisions in a typed memo to the director before 7 o'clock on 2 separate mornings. She was right about the lighting. She was right about the blocking. The director had, quietly and without attribution, incorporated both corrections. But here's where it changes. The production had added a co-lead 3 days into shooting. Not a supporting role. A co-lead, someone whose name would appear alongside hers on the poster, whose scenes with her would define the picture's emotional architecture, and who had not been her choice, had not been consulted with her, and whose working style was, by every metric available, the direct opposite of her own. John Wayne was 45 years old that October. He had made 81 films. He had spent 31 years in Hollywood, longer than Hepburn had been in pictures. And he had made the transition from bit player to leading man to genuine American cultural institution with a consistency that baffled critics who found him difficult to categorize. He was not a trained actor in the sense that word had meaning in New York theater. He had learned to act on film, in the specific grammar of film, from directors like John Ford and Henry Hathaway and Raoul Walsh, men who shot in real light on real terrain and expected their actors to be functional members of a working crew, not visiting artists requiring special accommodation. He had not read about the American West. He had worked in it, and on the afternoon of October 14, 1952, at approximately 3:47 in the afternoon, under 4 5,000-watt arc lights on RKO's Lot 7, these two people came to a moment that the 43 witnesses present would spend the rest of their lives describing to anyone who would listen. John Wayne arrived on the RKO lot that morning at 6:15 a.m. Not because his call time was 6:15. His call time was 8 o'clock. He arrived at 6:15 because he had learned, in 8 decades of film production, that the hour before the crew arrives is the hour when you understand what a set actually is. He walked the sound stage alone, in work boots and a canvas shirt, his hands loose at his sides. The stage manager who led him in that morning, a 23-year-old named Gerald Parsons, who would go on to work on 47 more productions before retiring in 1989, said later that Wayne didn't say a word when he entered. He just nodded and started walking the perimeter of the set. He walked it twice, measured the distance from the west wall to the camera position with his feet, counting the steps, studied the set dressing, the hand-hewn furniture, the period-correct iron cookware, the way the prop department had positioned the window to use the practical light from the overhead bays. He crouched down next to a wagon wheel that formed the set's left boundary marker and looked at it for a long time without touching it. When Gerald Parsons asked him later what he'd been looking at, Wayne said, checking the grain of the wood. Wheels like that were made of white oak. That one's pine. Nobody'll see it from camera, but I'll know it's there. That's not a perfectionist detail. That's a man who has trained himself to read what's real and what's performed, and to let that reading settle into his body before a single frame of film is shot. By the time Katharine Hepburn arrived at 7:55, 5 minutes early, which was, by her standards, precisely on time, Wayne had been on the sound stage for over 90 minutes. He was sitting on an apple box near the second camera position, reading the day's pages, not studying them with visible intensity, reading them the way a man reads something he already mostly knows. Hepburn saw him and walked directly toward him. Her posture, as always, communicated advanced intelligence. There was something she intended to say, and she had organized it already. She had objections to the morning's first scene. They were specific objections, and they were not unreasonable. The scene required her character to cross behind Wayne's during a line of dialogue, a piece of blocking she felt undermined the power dynamic the script had spent 20 pages building. She was, by any objective reading, correct. She said so, clearly, in complete sentences, looking directly at him. Wayne listened to all of it without moving the pages in his hands. When she finished, he looked up from the script. He didn't speak immediately. He looked at the set, at the specific position she described, and then he looked back at her. "You're right about that," he said. She blinked. Just once. But in that single blink, something shifted, because she had prepared for this conversation to be a debate, and he had just removed the debate before it started. That was when she first understood, though she wouldn't fully name it for 3 more weeks, that she was dealing with something she had not encountered before on any set in her 31 years of making pictures. And that was also when the director, a veteran named Maxwell Whitmore, who had been watching this exchange from 20 feet away, felt the particular sensation that experienced directors feel when two forces they cannot fully control have just begun to take the measure of each other. He didn't intervene. Later, he said he knew better. The argument, when it came, and it had been building for 3 weeks, through 14 days of principal photography, through 12 script discussions, through 4 disagreements about blocking, 2 about lighting, and 1 that lasted 40 minutes about whether a particular prop rifle should be cocked or uncocked when first introduced on camera, came on a Tuesday afternoon. The scene being filmed was the picture's emotional pivot. Hepburn's character was confronting Wayne's over a decision he had made without her. A decision that the script framed as protective, but that she read as dismissive. It was the scene the whole picture had been building toward, and it required genuine heat between the two of them. The kind of heat that you cannot manufacture with technique alone. They had rehearsed it twice that morning. Both rehearsals had been technically correct and emotionally hollow, and everyone on the set knew it, and no one said so out loud. At 3:31 in the afternoon, Maxwell Whitmore called for the third rehearsal. The 43 crew members on Lot 7 repositioned. The camera operators took their marks. The script supervisor, a woman named Dorothy Chun, who had worked on 22 productions and had a reputation for accurate notes, uncapped her pen. Hepburn and Wayne took their positions on opposite sides of the set, 14 feet apart, a distance the blocking called for. Wayne was still. Hepburn ran 2 lines of the scene quietly under her breath, not warming up the text but checking it, verifying her own internal architecture. And then, without the director calling action, she turned to face Wayne fully and said, at full volume, in front of every person on that sound stage, "I wonder if you understand what this scene is actually about." The room didn't go silent immediately. It went silent in stages, the way a crowd goes silent when something happens that takes a half second to register. First, the background chatter stopped. Then the technical adjustments stopped. Then the rustling of coats and the shuffle of feet. Until there were 43 people in a room, and the only sound was the low hum of the arc lights. It was not the words that stopped the room. It was the precision of them. She was not asking if he was prepared. She was stating, in the cleanest possible grammatical structure, that she believed he was not. 31 years of film. 81 productions. An Oscar nomination for Red River. The film that had broken his screen persona open in ways that surprised even his most loyal defenders. And Katharine Hepburn had just asked, in front of 43 witnesses, whether he understood the material. Maxwell Whitmore took a step forward. He had the instinct of a man who has spent 20 years preventing the exact thing that was about to happen from happening. He stopped walking before he took the second step, because John Wayne had not moved. He had not changed his expression. He had not shifted his weight. He had not looked at Whitmore or at the crew or at the camera. He had simply continued to look at Katharine Hepburn with the same quality of attention he had given the wagon wheel that morning. Steady, specific, entirely without performance. And inside that stillness, something was happening that only the people who were closest to him could see. His hands, which had been at his sides, relaxed. Not the relaxation of a man standing down. The relaxation of a man deciding. What happened next, nobody expected. In the first second, he said nothing. In the second second, he said nothing. In the third second, the third full second of silence in front of 43 people. A silence that Dorothy Chun would describe in an interview 30 years later as the loudest thing I ever heard on a sound stage. John Wayne took one step toward Katharine Hepburn. Not an aggressive step, a considered one. The step of a man who has measured the distance and knows exactly what it means. He stopped. He was now 11 feet away from her instead of 14. 3 feet of movement. In the grammar of that room, at that moment, it was the equivalent of a declaration. And then he did something that no one who was present that day ever forgot, and that most of them described, when they described it at all, in almost identical terms. He began to perform the scene. Not rehearse it. Perform it. He did not wait for the director. He did not wait for the cameras to roll. He simply began, at the point in the scene where his character speaks first, and he spoke the lines with a specificity that was different, qualitatively different, from the 2 rehearsals that morning. The technical correctness was still there, but underneath it now was something else, something that had not been there before. 43 people watched Katharine Hepburn's face. In the first 4 words of his first line, something crossed her expression that Dorothy Chun, who was watching specifically and professionally, described as not surprise exactly, recalibration. Her chin, which had been 3 degrees above horizontal since she'd entered the scene, leveled. Her arms, which had been folded, dropped to her sides. By the time he reached the line's end, she was in the scene. Not responding, In it, the way you are in something that is real, not the way you are in something that is performed. She delivered her response. And this is the moment that 43 people, when interviewed separately and at different points over the following 30 years, described with identical language. She delivered it to him, not to the camera. Not to the 43 people watching. Not to Maxwell Whitmore or to Dorothy Chun, or to the memory of every disagreement they'd had over the previous 3 weeks. She delivered it to the specific man standing 11 feet away from her, in a canvas shirt, in a room that had gone completely and permanently still. The silence beat came at the end of her second line. For seconds, no one on that set moved. The arc lights hummed. And then something happened that was not in the script and not in any rehearsal and not in anything Maxwell Whitmore had planned for that afternoon. Wayne answered her, not the character's line, but something in the space between the character's lines, a 3-word response that was so small and so precise that only Hepburn, standing 11 feet away, could have heard it clearly. The script supervisor's notes from that day, which still exist in the RKO production archive, have a margin notation at that exact moment that reads simply, unscripted. Kept. What he said, those 3 words, was not a demonstration of technique. It was not a display of range or training or accumulated credential. It was the thing that Katharine Hepburn had spent 31 years in pictures asking for from every co-lead she had ever shared a frame with, and had received in full measure from precisely 4 of them. He was present, not performing presence, not manufacturing sincerity, simply present, the way a person is present when they have decided that the other person in the room matters more than their own image of themselves. The scene ran for 11 more minutes, through 6 more exchanges, through the emotional peak that the script had been building toward for 68 pages, through the resolution that neither actor had fully landed in rehearsal that morning. They ran it without stopping, without notes, without Maxwell Whitmore calling cut, because Whitmore understood, somewhere in the second minute of what he was watching, that calling cut would be an act of destruction. When it ended, neither of them moved immediately. They stood 11 feet apart in the particular silence that follows something that has used up every available molecule of oxygen in a room. And then John Wayne did what he always did at the end of the necessary moment. He stepped back, 1 step, returning to 14 feet, returning to the blocking, returning, in that single movement, to the position of a man who is a part of the crew, not the center of anything, not the demonstration, just a man who showed up and did the work. He looked at Maxwell Whitmore. "You want to try it on camera?" he said. The camera version was done in 2 takes. Maxwell Whitmore printed the second. Dorothy Chun noted in her log that the second take ran 12 minutes and 40 seconds. Unusually long for a single uninterrupted shot in that era of production. The camera operator, a 30-year veteran named Sam Alcott, told Whitmore afterward that he had kept the camera rolling 16 seconds past the scene's end because he had not been certain the scene was over. "It felt like it was still happening," Alcott said. Even after they stopped. The crew wrapped at 6:20 that evening. The larger group dispersed, grips and electricians and the wardrobe and continuity departments, in the ordinary organized chaos of a set closing down for the night. Hepburn remained near the set center, reading the next day's pages. Wayne was near the exit, talking quietly with the property master about the wagon wheel. When the sound stage had emptied to just the 2 of them and Gerald Parsons, who was the last crew member remaining, Hepburn walked to where Wayne was standing. Parsons, who was pretending to organize a prop table near the west wall and would feel guilty about it for the rest of his life, said he could not hear the first part of what she said. Her voice was low. She was not whispering. Katharine Hepburn did not whisper as a general principle. But she was not projecting, which, for her, amounted to the same thing. What he heard clearly, because Wayne's voice carried differently, was Wayne's response. "The scene already knows what it's about," Wayne said. "You just have to stop explaining it and let it happen." A pause. "And then, you know that. You've always known that. You just forget it when you think somebody else in the room doesn't know it." What followed was a silence of approximately 12 seconds. Gerald Parsons counted, because he was 23 and had the instinct of someone who understood that he was witnessing something he would spend his life trying to describe accurately. In that silence, he saw Katharine Hepburn do something he had not seen her do in 3 weeks on the set, and that he described, when he described it, with a consistency and a precision that suggests he got it right. She laughed. Not the polite laugh of social deflection. Not the sharp, ironic laugh she deployed when someone said something she found either funny or foolish. A laugh that came from somewhere she had not planned, that took her a half-second to recognize, and that she did not attempt to manage. "That," she said when it finished, "is the first genuinely useful thing anyone has said to me on this set." Wayne looked at her. There was no triumph in the look, none of the satisfaction that a man who has just scored a point produces, even when he tries not to. It was the same reading the horizon look that Gerald Parsons had seen on his face when he'd arrived at 6:15 that morning. "I'm not trying to be useful," Wayne said. "I'm trying to finish the picture." He held out his hand. She shook it, a firm, single shake, the kind of handshake that two people exchange when they have agreed on the terms of something important. "Same time tomorrow," he said. 6:15, she said. He smiled. 8 o'clock's fine. She walked out first. Wayne stayed another 4 minutes, finishing his conversation with the property master about the wagon wheel, which was, as he had determined that morning, made of pine. They found a white oak replacement in the studio prop warehouse the following day. It appears in every subsequent frame of the film. Years later, more than 20 of them, Katharine Hepburn gave a series of interviews that became, in certain circles of film study, more referenced than the films themselves. She was in her late 60s by then, and she spoke about her career with the unsentimental clarity of a person who has stopped needing anything from anyone and can therefore say exactly what they think. She spoke about Spencer Tracy, with whom she made 9 films and shared her life for 27 years. She spoke about Cary Grant, about George Cukor, about the particular education she received working opposite actors who were better than she expected them to be. She spoke about John Wayne once, in an interview conducted for the American Film Institute in 1974. The interviewer asked her about the transition from theatrical to cinematic performance. The specific technical problem of learning to do less, to stop projecting to the back of a house that doesn't exist, to trust that the camera will find what is real without your help. Hepburn was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "I learned it properly only once. On a Tuesday afternoon in October of 1952, from a man I had spent 3 weeks being certain I had nothing to learn from." She did not elaborate. She moved to the next question. But the students of directors and actors who came after her carried that statement into their own work, and into their own arguments with themselves about the difference between demonstrating skill and revealing truth. A generation of actors who trained with the AFI Conservatory program in the late 1970s heard that story from instructors who had been in the room, or had heard it from someone who had. It circulated not as Hollywood legend, the kind of story that gets larger and more theatrical with each retelling, but in the smaller, quieter form of something that people pass along because it cost them something to understand it. The wagon wheel made of white oak. The step from 14 feet to 11. The 3 unscripted words that Dorothy Chin noted in the margin and marked kept. What happened on RKO's Lot 7 on October 14th, 1952 is not in any biography of either figure as a primary source account. It lives in production logs, in a script supervisor's notes, in a stage manager's memory, in the margin of a document in an archive that very few people have had reason to look for. Return to the image. 4 arc lights, 43 witnesses, 2 people standing 11 feet apart in a room that has gone completely still. The question was never who would win. The question, the one Hepburn was still answering in 1974, and that her students were still answering in 1989, and that anyone who has ever stood in a room with someone they were certain they already understood is still answering now, was simpler than that. The question was, what happens when you stop performing understanding and actually try to have it? She showed up. He was present. One afternoon changed everything. The lesson was not about film. It was not about technique or training or the 40-year argument between theatrical and cinematic acting. It was about the difference between explaining what you know and letting what you know speak on its own terms. John Wayne never explained himself on that set. He simply showed up, read the wagon wheel, measured the distance, and when the moment arrived, he stepped forward 11 feet and let the work be what it actually was. Katharine Hepburn never forgot that. And neither did the 43 people who were standing in that room when the arc lights hummed and the silence held, and 2 of the most formidable presences in American film history found, in the space between 14 feet and 11, something neither of them had planned for. One decision, one step, one afternoon that history almost walked past without stopping. But there is one conversation between them that no production log records. It happened after the film wrapped, off the lot, away from any crew or witness. And what Katharine Hepburn said in that conversation, what she told him she had never said to anyone on any set in 30 years, that is a story for another time.